Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Graham Friend, representing Poulton North, and I will be chairing the meeting. Due to the current coronavirus pandemic, the Council have taken steps to follow restrictions and health guidance in relation to self-isolation and social distancing, whilst balancing the needs of carrying out our regulatory functions. This is the second meeting of this committee that is being held remotely. The agenda for the meeting will run as per the usual format. I can confirm that the meeting is being broadcast live to the public. However, there will be no input from the public. They only have audio access. This is in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020, Section 78. I will now ask all those present to introduce themselves, starting with my fellow councillors. Councillor Froggett.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Flaherty.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I'm present.
Any other Johnson? Okay. Don't think there are any other councillors present at the moment. Democratic Services.
Yeah, Adam Kellogg, Democratic Services Officer.
And we have the Deputy Chief Executive.
Good evening, Councillor. Linton Green here.
We have Mrs. Blackburn.
Good evening, everyone. Eleanor Blackburn, Head of Strategic Partnerships and Commissioning.
We have Dale Drinkwater.
Thanks, Chair. Dale's just dropped off the call because I'll be covering the IT side tonight from Democratic Services.
Thank you. Chris Skinkis.
Good evening. I'm the Service Coordinator in Neighbourhoods.
Right, I think that's it. We turn to the agenda. Have I missed anybody? I don't think so. Okay, item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
I haven't received any apologies for absence, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, Code of Conduct. Members are reminded that they have their responsibility to declare any disclosionary pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests which they have in any item of business on the agenda no later when that item is reached. Item 3, minutes of the meeting. We all had a sight of the minutes of the meeting that took place virtually on the 29th of September 2020.
Yeah, can I move them as a correct record, Chair?
Certainly, providing nobody's got any comments or corrections. Okay, I'll take that they are a correct record. Okay, item 4, food justice. Now then, who's leading with this?
Chair, it's Eleanor here. I will lead with a presentation.
Thank you very much, Eleanor.
You just give me 1 second. I will pull the
Yes,
presentation.
I will now mute my mic. Could everybody mute their mics if they're not speaking? Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see a presentation?
I certainly can, yes.
Yes, that's fine, Eleanor. We've got that up.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start this evening by just providing some facts and figures and information on food poverty and food insecurity. And this is some headline information that we have pulled together with data sets that we've already got ready access to. So as the slide sets out, we're going to cover a range of information this evening, and it would be helpful, I think, if committee members could note questions for the end of the presentation. But before I begin, I would like to thank Warrington Citizens Advice, Warrington Food Bank and the Council's Business Intelligence team for providing the information that has been pulled together in this presentation. Okay, so it's important that we start off with a definition of what food poverty is, and it's defined as the inability to acquire or consume an adequate or sufficient quantity of food in socially acceptable ways, or the uncertainty that one will be able to do so.
Hello.
Sorry, is one of the co-opted members has just joined the call. You'll just need to mute your phone and turn off the live stream that you've got up in the background. So if you just mute your phone by hitting *6, please.
Sorry, I can't hear you because I can't join the meeting.
Yeah, sorry, the meeting started. Could you just mute your phone by pressing *6? Thank you. Sorry, Eleanor, that should be fine now if you want to continue.
Okay. So as members will be aware, food poverty can have a detrimental impact on physical and psychological well-being. So it is incredibly important for individuals, for families to have access to and the choice of affordable, acceptable and healthy diets throughout their life. And we talk about food poverty, but we also talk about food insecurity. And food insecurity is most commonly used when measuring the full scale and understanding of the nature of food poverty. And food insecurity has got varying degrees of severity. So the early stages can involve worry about whether there's going to be enough food, but it can also involve compromising quality, variety and quantity of food as well. But that point about choice is quite important, and particularly access to healthy food as well. So it really demonstrates the breadth of food insecurity. And of course, the most extreme version of food insecurity is going without food and experiencing hunger. And that's what we most often think about when we think about food poverty. So I'm going to move on now to talk a little bit about some of the national data that we've been able to pull together. So I'm sure everyone's probably heard of the Trussell Trust. The network supports around 1,200 food bank centres across the UK, including in Warrington. And over the last 5 years, the Trussell Trust has seen a 74% increase in the number of 3-day food parcels, which is their standard food parcel that they provide. And this has included an 18% increase in 2019 and 20, when 1.9 million parcels were issued across the country. And some of the drivers, or the main drivers that you'll see for food insecurity and food poverty are debt, and that can include things like deductions from universal credit payments, delivery of working age benefits, including that important 5-week wait period, which can often lead people into quite quick desperation, financial desperation. Benefit levels, which have been frozen since 2015 nationally. There was an increase in 2019, but I think if some of the press releases recently are to be believed, there could be a further freeze at some point. Poor quality employment, including low pay, insecure work and erratic pay. Health problems, and that's both mental and physical, can also be one of the drivers. Stagnant wages, and then lack of savings. And this point around lack of savings is quite important, because what it demonstrates is a lack of financial resilience. And quite often where we see issues, it's where individuals or family members haven't got assets. So, some of us might be homeowners, for example. That's an asset that we could ultimately fall back on. If you're in rented accommodation, if you haven't got savings, if you haven't got family and friends around you who are able to financially support, that's where people can very quickly fall into difficulties. So we'll look at COVID now, the impact of COVID. Lockdown forced the closure of a quarter of UK businesses. and prevented millions from working in the first sort of main lockdown period from March. And what we saw then was in the last 2 weeks of March, the DWP recorded over 1 million claims for universal credit, and that's 7 times the usual rate of applications. There was support and there was help put in place, so job retention scheme, for example, self-employed income support scheme, and that provided support for around 1/3 of the UK workforce. Changes have been made to increase levels of support provided by the social security system, and there have been temporary suspensions of deductions from universal credit and pauses on evictions, which has been particularly welcomed. But there have been some gaps. So more than 1.5 million self-employed people found that they weren't eligible for support. That included newly self-employed people. The overall benefit cap is still in place, and the 5-week wait for universal credit remain largely unchanged, although there are ways that you can get prepayments, but it does involve sort of working your way through the system. And there's no additional social security provision for nearly 1.4 million people in the UK who've had no recourse to public funds. So going back to the Trussell Trust then, in April 2020, they had an overall increase of 89% in the number of 3-day emergency food parcels. And that included a 107% increase in 3-day food parcels for families with children. And again, similarly increasing in Q2, so the April to June period as a whole. The Food Foundation, another organisation, they conducted surveys throughout the crisis period, and in May they found that 4.9 million adults were food insecure compared to 2 million pre-lockdown, and within that 1.7 million children were impacted. So we're talking quite large numbers across the country here. So if we then look at what that means locally, now most of you are going to be familiar with the map of deprivation that visually shows the distribution of deprivation across Warrington. This slide is similar, but it concentrates on income deprivation affecting children, with the dark blue areas the most deprived and the light green the least deprived. Now remember, this is about average numbers across local areas. It doesn't mean that there aren't any deprived households living in Appleton or Grappenhall, for example. It just means that on average in those areas there are less than the national average for similar sized areas. And this second slide, this shows the deprivation rank change. So this is the change in deprivation between 2015 and 2019 for income deprivation affecting children. So you'll see a different pattern here. And what this shows is the dark blue or dark purple means the area has become slightly more deprived, and the dark orange areas slightly less deprived. So it doesn't necessarily make a big difference in terms of the overall patterns of deprivation, but it does show that there is some variability, there is some fluctuation across areas. So a similar slide here, but this is just focused on income deprivation affecting older people. There is a slightly more blue areas. So as a reminder, the blue areas are the more deprived areas. But when you look at the change then between 2015 and 19, what you'll see is much less fluctuation, so many more white areas. And this is showing that there isn't a huge amount of fluctuation or a huge amount of change in terms of deprivation levels affecting older people. So this slide focuses on universal credit claimants. Again, this is focusing on Warrington. So this data runs from March 2018 to October 2020. The October data is pending. It's not been absolutely had the final checks against it, but it's usually fairly accurate once we get the data announced. So this shows the percentage of people claiming for universal credit across the whole of Warrington, and that's the green line. So that the bottom line is representing the percentages of universal credit across the whole of Warrington. And then the blue line, the top line, that is demonstrating the percentage of claimants in the central 6 ward areas. So those 6 ward areas that we commonly know as the most deprived, or having the average most deprived number of people living within them. So you will see that there is a spike in claims from March 2020. That's where the jump happens, and that has continued to rise. But what you will see is that there has been a sharper spike in the central 6 areas. So the 2 lines are getting further apart from one another. Now, we've given the numbers in the slide for the central 6 areas, but just to put this into context across the whole of Warrington, the provisional universal claimant figure, I should say, for Warrington in October, so last month, was 17,820 people. And that is up from 10,582 in March. So you can see that is a significant jump in the number of people claiming universal credit across Warrington. Now, this is quite a complicated slide, so apologies to committee members for this. But if we focus on the bottom line, so the whole of the Warrington line, and you look at the 3rd and the 6th column, so what you'll see is that in January 2020, there were just over 16% of pupils in Warrington who were eligible for free school meals. And that's 4,945 individuals. And then in October 2020, you'll see that that had increased to over 18% of pupils in Warrington were eligible for free school meals, or 5,661 pupils. Okay, last data slide, but possibly the most important in this particular context, in this presentation. So this is from Warrington Food Bank, and Warrington Food Bank are a part of the Trussell Trust network. So in 2018-19, they gave out 78 tonnes of food, which equates to over 7,000 food parcels or over 72,000 meals. And out of those, 35% went to children. This was already an increase on 2017-18. What we see then is that then increased again in 2019-20. So there was 93 tonnes of food, over 9,000 food parcels and over 92,000 meals. And what we also saw was that 52% of those went to children, so a jump there as well. Now, the Food Bank don't have the accurate data for 2020-2021 as yet, but they are estimating at the moment that they're likely to have seen an increase of at least 40%. Okay, so this is the final slide. Believe it or not, that was intended as a headline presentation of just some of the data sets that we've got that sets out some of the data available to us. It is a very complicated and difficult policy area that certainly warrants some more attention. So I've put two key recommendations on the slide for the committee to consider. And I believe Linton might want to say a little bit more about this as well. But if I could just initially hand back to yourself, Chair, I'm happy to open up to questions or comments.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Chairman?
Chair, may I ask?
Go on, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, just say sort of thank you for the report, and you know it does not make good listening to, does it? It's a real concern, and you know we haven't really seen the figures, as you say, for this period of time at the moment, and there is going to be a big increase, and obviously we have issues across the town, and obviously I'd sort of be interested in other figures as well for the outer wards, but you know it's a real concern and something we need to really look at and break down and understand. But thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Flaherty, did you have a question?
Yes, please. Good evening. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was just interested in that whilst the food bank has provided all the background information for how many parcels they've given out, have we got any data on the more informal, what we've come to call doorstep food shares, which tend to deal with supermarket waste rather than providing food parcels, but do still look after people who are borderline on food poverty? I have some personal experience of this, so I do know that there is a very important gap that is filled by the food share offer across the town. So I'm just wondering if we've got any data about how much food they're actually providing.
It's a really important question, Councillor Flaherty, and for the purposes of this presentation, we didn't have time to pull that together, but I think this forms part of the recommendation that we've put forward, that we do need to do some further work, and we need to understand exactly what is being provided and how much is being provided and under what circumstances as well. So what need is being seen by those more sort of community-based, sometimes a little bit more informal, but still very important food offers. So I think that's something that we would like to take forward and explore in a little bit more depth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Well, I've been involved in setting up a food bank in Padgate, and we've had our busiest day today. We usually open for 3 hours. We usually get all the work done in about 2 hours. We overran by 15 minutes. Really hard work. I came through very, very tired just from a 3-hour stint there, packing parcels for people. It's noticeably getting worse in the last, I'd say, 10 to 14 days. So the fact that the food bank don't have the figures for a lot of this year, that I think they're going to be worse than last year. And what is happening now is, I think we're seeing another big jump of people in need in Warrington. Also, we had our pre-meeting. It was on when I speak to officers on Thursday, the 12th of November, and I got home from that pre-meeting and there was an article in the Warrington Guardian that's I just read a couple of points from the article. Warrington residents are in more than £30,000 debt on average, according to a new study. The survey found that the average debt levels in Warrington were £31,539, which is £13%, which is 13% higher than the national average. And it goes on to talk about the key areas, people who are having to self-isolated, and in some cases take advantage of government support scheme, and as a result could actually see their debt levels increase. So we're above the national average in people in debt, and it is getting worse. Said we got all the figures from the food bank. I know the council, along with the government scheme, ran a scheme from Fernhead Community Centre, where a great deal of valuable work was done and a great amount of food was moved there. Do we have any figures for that initiative?
Hi, it's Chris Kinkis here.
Yes, I know you were involved in it, Chris.
I don't have any figures to hand. I can certainly supply some figures in terms of the. We do know exactly how many food parcels that were distributed and as part of that food offer, and I think
it was a phenomenal number, wasn't it, Chris?
It is, yeah. So and there were two aspects to it. It was obviously we know that there were nearly 2,000 food parcels made available to people during the initial lockdown, but there was also the work that preceded that in terms of the food pantry and supporting people achieve a more economic stability within their households, a more sustainable position for people. And we would look to pick that up again once we start to emerge from this particular crisis. But I think it was nearly 2,000 food parcels that were distributed, something like 1,980 food parcels that were distributed during the initial lockdown. And I think, but a lot of that was driven as well by the difficulty in terms of people accessing food, not necessarily to do with affordability. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else?
Sorry, Chair, probably just
Linton, yeah.
Yeah, if there aren't any other questions from members, I think it was probably just directing back to Eleanor's last slide. I think one of the things that we felt was important, given how important this subject is, that we couldn't do it justice in this quick turnaround to scrutiny committee. And I know it's on the back of a motion from full council, but I think the recommendation from officers was that we managed to set up a separate working party. And maybe that is work that comes under the Protecting the Most Vulnerable Policy Committee, that we can take this forward. So
yes.
I'll get this right, won't it? Under the Building Stronger Communities Policy Committee.
Yes, definitely.
Chair, please.
Sorry, Councillor Fraharty.
So can I just comment on that, please?
Certainly.
As chair of the Building Stronger Communities Committee, and also chair of the Central Six Community Forum, we have been discussing this for some time, with concerns about the differences between there's food share, fair share and food banks, and the standard of provision and all those things. And so I have already asked for that to be added to our committee agenda, and I've asked for it to be brought forward, and hopefully it will make it onto the agenda for January if officers have time to bring some more information and we can start that discussion. It obviously won't be resolved in January, but we can start that discussion going, and that would be better sooner rather than later, because things, as you mentioned yourself, Chair, are definitely getting worse. There are more people all the time coming to the different offerings. Thank you.
Yes, and it was interesting to see the food banks identifying what are the causes of food poverty within the town, which is something I'd wondered where we would get those sort of statistics from. Why are people in this situation? Because it was the situation was getting worse before the pandemic hit. It was on the rise, and I think 20 odd years ago, I think talking to Mr. McDonald at the food bank, he said when they started 20 odd years ago, the first year they moved about 1/2 ton of food, and now they're moving what, 90 odd tons of food a year. So it's gradually got worse, and I think identifying things like the problems around universal credit, etc., and erratic wages, whether that's 0 hours contracts or whatever it is, over these last years have put us in quite I was going to say a bad position, and the coronavirus has just made it worse. The second part of the motion, which we were asked to look at and give 6 months, is to come back with some recommendations on what the council can do. And that's something I've thought about greatly as well, particularly, as I'm sure Linton will tell us, we don't really have many resources. We talked about the people I talked about the people in trouble, in debt within the town. The council has a similar problem with its revenue this year. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Linton. We just don't have the resources to do a great deal.
We don't immediately, Chair, but I think, as you know, we try to be as creative as possible with very scarce resources within Warrington.
Oh yes, we've been very good at that. Yes.
This is perhaps why I won't comment on it too much, is we're still unpicking some of the information from the Chancellor's spending review statement today. And there are one or two things in there that might help us slightly. I guess the other is that we were given money around the winter grants to start giving out, and we've been working through processes on that, which is particularly targeted at helping with food as well as with fuel poverty. So we are working on giving out that grant, which is just under £600,000 across Warrington. So will be very helpful to those most in need.
We were also at the start, weren't we, told to do what was necessary for the pandemic, and the government would reimburse us, and we spent quite a lot of money on the pandemic and haven't quite received back from central government the same amount of money.
Yes, at the moment we've spent around £40 million and we've received back about £20 million.
So there's a £20 million hole there.
There probably would be if it wasn't for the strong financial management across the council, but yes, definitely a gap between the two things.
Does that include loss of income from, say, car parks? And
it does. It includes loss of income from car parks and quite perversely with this item, loss of income relating to school meals.
This is a totally, I think I'm digressing a little but I think what I'm trying to get at is, what do officers think we can do? I'm at a loss as to what I think the council can do.
I think immediately it is difficult, and that's part of the reason why we thought it's so important to set up a working group to go through that and properly action plan out what we can do. And I'm encouraged by the comments from Councillor Flaherty of the Building Stronger Communities Committee already looking at some of that. I think from that we can build quite a strong action plan around how we can address it, or at least do the best that the council can with its resources and local resources to do our very best to address it.
Yes, yes. Right, does anybody have anything else on this? I think, as you say, it's a work in progress. The motion at council did give us 6 months to look at this, which was passed by council, so I thought it was necessary to get to have it on a meeting straight away to see where we go forward. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next item then, the work programme?
Chair, just to double check that the committee's happy to take forward the recommendations which are on those last slides of this presentation.
Would you like a vote on that?
Yes, but just an indication that it's the will of the meeting to accept those recommendations.
Okay,
yeah,
we could.
Chair. It's fine by me.
Councillor Froggatt's in favour. Councillor Flaherty?
I'm in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Yes, in favour.
And myself, Councillor Friend, I'm in favour, so that's unanimous.
And Councillor Cooksey as well, Chair.
Oh, sorry, have you joined us, Hilary?
I have.
Good evening.
I'm joined as well. It's Alex Abbey.
Oh, hello, Alex. Are you?
Yeah, I agree as well.
In favour as well, Alex?
I vote in favour.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So that brings us on to the work programme, which is in your packs. Going through it, after food justice, which was tonight, is Parks and Open Spaces strategy on the 17th of February. Then we have Livewire and Culture Warrington on the 14th of April. And we have nothing beyond then, of course, because we will be going into elections. But I think we do need to put the food justice back in that work programme. I'm sure any incoming administration would also want to look at food justice, but do you think that needs to come back in well, they gave us 6 months from the council meeting, wasn't it? So is that about 4 months? So it will be before the elections, won't it?
Yeah, I think as the item's been referred to the Building Stronger Communities Policy Committee, we could keep it on the work programme and then just check on an update of that committee's progress at that time.
Yes, that's fine. Is there anything else we need to look at in the work programme?
Again, Chair, the work programme set up to the all-out elections in May, and then it'll probably be maybe at the February meeting. It'd be good for members to think about ideas for the work programme after the elections, just so we have something to start on with potentially
Yes.
new members of the committee over in the summer.
Yes. Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else on the work programme, I know of no part 2. Are there any part two?
Nothing else, Chair. No part 2 tonight, Chair.
Right, so I think that's it. I think it's time to close the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
No.